Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, 5 Steps to Crafting a Killer Trade Story. It's awesome to see the numbers piling in. I've seen some people joining from here in London. We've got Johannesburg connected, and many of you guys across the pond joining slowly in as we get started today. So it's awesome to see you guys. Welcome wherever it is that you're virtually joining from. As today's webinar suggests, in the next hour, we're going to be covering the 5 steps required to craft the perfect trade story. So if you're an emerging brand out there and you're looking to expand your distribution or break into your next retail outlet, hopefully, today we'll be able to share with you guys some interesting tips and tricks for your next retail presentation. My name is Michael Coden. I'm the head of marketing here at ProQuo AI. Thank you all for joining. Just briefly, ProQuo is a brand management platform that's built especially to help challenger brands grow. Every day we speak to real people about your brand, any number of your competitors, and the category that you're operating in. And we tell you where your brand stands with people. As our name suggests, we have AI within our platform that looks at all of the data we gather on your brand to serve you with actionable brand guidance for growth. Before ProQuo, I spent about 10 years at Unilever working within their personal care division. And I've spent time across the US, the UK, as well as their Australasian region, presenting a number of different trade stories to different kinds of buyers, from Walmart and Target to Woolworths and Kohl's, and everywhere in between, Tesco's and Sainsbury's and so on. And so I can empathize kind of with the subject matter that it can be really intimidating presenting to a buyer for the first time if you don't have the right data at your fingertips. And today, I'm really excited to share with you the tips and tricks that we can share from a ProQuo perspective alongside our buyer, Lisa Cherry, who's a buyer from John Lewis and Waitrose. She's got 8 years of buying experience in the home and electrical category. Lisa, would you mind saying hello to those that have joined today?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for the intro, Michael. I'm really excited to be here today. Michael has invited me along as, I guess, a subject matter expert for you and to answer some of your questions from my personal point of view as a retail buyer. I've worked in the industry for the past 8 years, and I've worked predominantly across home and electrical categories. So thank you for submitting the questions, and I look forward to answering them later on.
Thank you, Lisa. We've got a lot of great things in store for you today. And most importantly, we're going to cover the top 5 kind of important steps needed to build a trade story. And along the way, we're going to pause, and Lisa's going to answer some of the burning questions that you guys so brilliantly submitted over the last 2 weeks leading up to today's webinar. We did receive a heck of a lot of questions, which makes the subject matter a really interesting one to cover today. So we won't be able to cover all of the questions, but what we've done is we've created a Q&A document that we're going to cascade alongside an on-demand link to today's webinar. And that'll hit your email box tomorrow afternoon UK time, which will give you a bit of extra insight into some of the questions that we didn't get to today, but you guys did pose. And we've also set up a live chat, so definitely don't be shy. Head to www.proquoai.com/WhatsApp to get in on all of the live chat that's happening there. If you've got a question as we cover content today, pitch it there and we'll answer it if we've got time at the end. I've also seen that a lot of our current customers at ProQuo have joined. Thank you guys for tuning in today. As a thank you, we'd love to give you guys a free 1-month custom question upgrade. So we've set up a site called proquoai.com/upgrades for existing brands on ProQuo. And we've hooked you guys each up with a unique promo code, which is the first 3 letters of your first name and the first 3 letters of your last name. So mine would be, for example, MICCOD. So if you are a current customer of ProQuo, head to /upgrades and you can grab a free month, which includes 1 custom question per brand. A member of our team will reach out to you following today's webinar to get you up and running with that upgrade. And if you're new to ProQuo, we've got something for you guys as well, and that's at ProQuoAI.com/get started. New brands joining ProQuo, if you're interested, we've got free brand awareness tracking. That's daily brand awareness tracking, both prompted and unprompted, free for you guys. We'll show you later how it's a key kind of cornerstone to building a trade story is building your brand and showing your brand's awareness to a buyer. So that's free for you guys there at /get started with the same promo code, first 3 letters of your first name, first 3 letters of your last name. It isn't case sensitive. All right, that is all the housekeeping. So let's kick in with the 5 steps to crafting a killer trade story, starting with step 1. And when building a trade story, what I found is really important to do is to position yourself, in the shoes of a buyer. And keeping in mind that a buyer represents a category, and their goal is to maximize the value of that category year on year. And a lot of times a category can be non-expandable. So your first job really is to position yourself as that category expert and to make the buyer feel reassured that you understand kind of what it is that drives that buyer's category, and really understanding the relationships of what people need within the category. So that'll really help you show before you present your brand or the new product development you've created for that year, that you really have a grip on what it is that people need and what could make their category grow. And there's a couple of signs that you can show a buyer that prove that you really understand kind of what it is that drives their category. And the first is that you understand kind of the key drivers of it. And we'll come on in a second to kind of introduce you to the 16 different ways that a brand can relate to people and people can relate to brands. But by showing a buyer that you really understand the dynamics of the category at a 360 view, will really set yourself up for success from the start. The second thing that you'll want to signal to a buyer is that you understand how the relationships that people have with brands within a category change over time. So you'll really want to show them that you understand people's buying behaviors within a category and how buying behaviors can change as times change. And what's really key, especially now more than ever, for example, with COVID that's happened, since the end of last year and the start of this year, that relationships within a category can change within a dime. They can change in a flash. So making sure that you have your finger on the pulse of how people relate to brands within a category and how those relationships change have never been more important than they are now. Thirdly, you'll want to understand and show a buyer that you understand that people's behaviors within a category are not all created equal. So certain people within a category require different things. For example, men may require different things than women within a category. Younger people may require different things versus older people within a category. And most brands have a specific target, a specific audience that their brand resonates with. It's a subsegment, potentially of a larger group of people who are buying into that category. So it's important to show that not only do you understand how your brand relates to your own target audience, but you'll want to have a grip on how people in general within the category relate to brands within it. So what drives a category? There's 16 different things that you can use to frame up your trade story at a category level. And we've seen today that we've got quite a nice mix of people who are currently using ProQuo AI and also some new faces to the brand. And to put everyone on an equal playing field, let me quickly help you understand the 16 different drivers that we use to understand people's relationships with brands in whatever category the brand exists within. Existing customers will be familiar with this, but let me define some of the drivers for some of you joining us fresh today. These drivers will give you really a 360 view of how people relate to brands within your category. And brands tend to seduce and persuade people at both emotional and rational levels. So our 16 drivers touch on both a brand's power to persuade people, a brand's power to seduce people, the emotional connections that a brand has, as well as the rational. So if you follow me here along at the top left, a relationship between a brand and a person within a category can be defined by attraction. So simply, how well do people feel your brand looks and feels at shelf? Empathy is all about how well people feel a brand understands their needs. Aspiration is about how well people feel a brand kind of holds a sense of specialness. Innovation is about how thought leading the brand appears to be, how much momentum it has in market. Clarity is about kind of how solid the brand's role is within people's repertoire. Relevance looks at, as it says, the relevance of a brand to shoppers in their category. And performance is a measure of how well the brand serves its core purpose. So if you're a food or drinks brand, it might be about the quality of your brand's taste, or if you're a fragrance brand, it might be about smelling fresh. Cleaning brands might be about the efficacy of the clean, and so on. Differentiation is about how well your brand is unique versus other brands out there in the category. And on the right-hand side, we have 8 drivers, starting at the top with connection. Connection is about how well people relate to the brand. Integrity is how well people feel the brand does the right thing. Transparency looks at how open and honest your brand is. Your popularity is the sense of buzz people feel your brand possesses. Consistency is really about your brand's reliability to shoppers within the category. Accessibility is a measure of your brand's ease of use. Value for money looks at the cost of your brand versus the quality and is a measure of how worth it people feel your brand is. And finally, familiarity is about how well people feel they know your brand, what it stands for, what it does, essentially what it's all about. And all 16 drivers, all 16 of these things are important to people in a category. So what's really important when setting up your trade story, one of the first things you want to do is to show at a category level that you understand what it is that people value most and what it is that people need within the category that your brand fits in. And for people here today who use ProQuo, I just want to show you, 3, I call them money charts to set your trade story off on the right foot. And the first is looking at your 16 driver profile, but looking at it from the perspective of category importance. So you don't need to, again, worry about kind of capturing these screens live. We're going to send you a link to the on-demand version of this following today's webinar. But what I'd suggest to start your trade story is to look at your 16 driver profile as you see it here, ordered by category importance. And in this example, what you can see is essentially a heat map of the category as it is today. So highlighted in bright green are the drivers which people feel they need most from your category. So things like integrity, connection, transparency, and performance. And on the flip side, highlighted in red are the things people feel are least important. So empathy, clarity in this example, value for money, and accessibility. But what's really interesting, I think, when building a trade story, especially when it comes to a challenger brand's trade story, is that it isn't to say that the drivers which are in light red or red, which are further to the bottom, are unimportant. That's not true at all. It's just the spaces that maybe haven't been delivered upon yet or disrupted upon yet. And a lot of times I've seen challenger brands building trade stories that lean into those drivers because they can use those kind of lesser penetrated drivers as ways to show how they could potentially add category value and bring something new and disruptive to the category. But we're going to touch on that just a bit later. The second thing which is important to do is to understand how people's needs within the category change. So within ProQuo, a great screen to use is the compare mode, which allows you to look at your driver profile over time. So here we have a view of last year versus this year. And what you can see is that a year ago, the category was really kind of emotionally seductive. You can see the top left quadrant in the 2019 driver profile, quite bright green. But in the last year, it's been drivers like connection and transparency, which have heightened in importance. So as you understand how the dynamics of your category shift and how the changes in your category shift between what people needed last year and this year, what's great to do is to position yourself as a brand positioned to win against those drivers that are rising in importance within the category. Equally, understanding that not all shoppers are created equal within your category is really important. So with the compare mode on, you can also sub-segment the needs of the category by either demographic or gender. In this case, we have women on the left and men on the right. So in this example, within this particular category, what you can see is that women tend to be drawn a bit more to the seductive power of the category, and they tend to be a bit more driven through the emotional drivers of the category, whereas men tend to be a little bit more rational, and they tend to lean a little bit more towards the right, a little bit more towards the persuasion side of the category, which is essentially driven through how brands are perceived to activate their brand and market. So keeping this idea in mind that you need to first establish yourself as a category expert. A lot of you asked questions of Lisa around how to establish yourself, within that space as the category expert as times change. So Lisa, I wanted to ask you first, how can brands adapt to this new environment that we find ourselves in today, where growth is predominantly now being shifted towards being driven online?
Yeah, so sure, it's a great question. So I guess the first thing to know is obviously COVID has really speeded up that online mix. And what's really important here is that consumers have actually become far more comfortable in shopping in this channel. So things to think about, and it's worth thinking about, especially categories which have changed where they've actually typically had quite a low online mix, and that's been driving. So if we think of supermarkets, so this kind of creates quite unique dynamics and things that you can think about for your brand. So for me, it's all about how do you bring your brand to life in an online world. So it's thinking about how you can translate some of those sort of store selling points that that used to be really accessible to customers, and how do you put them online and get customers interacting with your product still. So think about your product. Was it a product driven by experiences? Is it tastings? Is it inspiration, visualization? And how you can bring that to life. So I guess the great thing about online is there's loads and loads of opportunity. So firstly, people tend to have more expandable shelves, so you can get more product typically on the shelf. It also gives you the ability to put a lot more information and content out there to the consumer, and far more than what you can sometimes put on a shelf edge label. Another thing to think about is often online, people have higher basket spends. And they curate those baskets while they're shopping. So think about your brand from that perspective. How can you translate those experiences into the online world? But then also think about what's really important to that customer when they're shopping in this online world, and their decision-making processes, and how you can provide information to help that. So something really important to consumers is ratings and reviews. And getting that real feedback from other people who've bought the product. This is especially important when you think of categories which are much more considered purchases or higher price points, where actually customers can spend quite a lot of time doing research. And then the other thing I would also have to think about is the assets you provide. They are vital for customer satisfaction, that people get what they think they're seeing, but also in an online world, retailers are faced with quite an expensive bill of online returns, and how you churn that stock back into the supply chain. So anything you do with your content that can make it more accurate so customers know what they're getting will also be very advantageous. I hope I've answered that one okay for you guys.
Fantastic, Lisa, thanks. And the guys as well may even throw a couple more questions in the WhatsApp following that. We had a second question come in, which I alluded to actually around sustainability, but many people joining us today asked about, when it comes to a category, the importance that sustainability holds to the decision-making process, and how important really is sustainability to a buyer right now. So would you mind commenting a bit on that, please?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, sustainability and provenance of your product is hugely important to me. And brands that are thoughtful about their environmental impact and social responsibility really are what's expected. And as I said, to be honest, actually in this market and customers, they do expect that from brands. They definitely expect it from the retailers that they choose to buy their products within. and choosing retailers that are socially responsible. So it's therefore an expectation of any brands that would be stocked. It's really interesting things to think about, that it kind of goes through your whole supply chain. So from the brand ethos, the product manufacturer in a thoughtful way, and then right through to the packaging and how that product's delivered to the end consumer, are all part of that process in how sustainable your product is. It's also to note that it's not always customer facing, and actually it's just a better way of doing business. I think the thing I would call out here is that sustainability has to be affordable, and customers expect it to be affordable. So when there's premiums added on, I think that is a real challenge for customer mindset.
Thanks, Lisa. Okay, guys, so we've gone through step one, kind of showing your expertise when it comes to category level data. Step two is about showing off your disruption opportunities. So let's dig into that next, shall we? All right, so the first thing to think about, whether you're on ProQuo AI today or not, you can still consider to yourself when shaping your trade story, which spaces can you disrupt? Looking at the 16 drivers of any category, you can consider to yourself, where are the big players playing? What is my competition currently delivering on? And then understanding where are potentially the white space opportunities, which big players aren't playing, your competition isn't playing, but that you could play and that you could disrupt. So what we'd recommend kind of when setting up your trade story, if you take a category, for example, like we've got here, which is an example from natural cosmetics, what you can often do is you can separate what's expected from the category and what's unexpected from the category. So drivers like performance, integrity, relevance, and transparency in this particular category are what shoppers are saying they require most from brands. And it's very likely that the largest of brands, probably the market leading brands, will be the ones that are owning those 4 drivers, delivering hardest against those 4 drivers. And they've probably been a little bit of the catalyst causing the needs to shift that way to start. So as a challenger brand, I think it's really important to look outside of those kind of hygiene drivers to see what it is that your brand could own that brings something new and different to the table within this category. So rather than the expected, it really should be about conquering the unexpected. So focus on unmet drivers. Think about what drivers are growing in importance. Consider how your brand could kind of own these drivers to further drive category growth. And explore what drivers people feel your brand possesses that no one else does, and then major on those. Emphasize to a buyer essentially how your brand could deliver category value by bringing something new and different to the table. I was working with the brand earlier this week on crafting a trade story, ironically, Lisa, for Waitrose. And there were a couple screens that we focused in on. And the first was showing kind of a brand's absolute performance against the 16 drivers ordered by what people feel is most important in the category. And what you often want to see for your brand, a challenger brand, in fact, is that you've got solid scores on what's most important within the category, but that your driver profile tends to peak towards the middle, even down towards the lower half of your driver profile. And what that signals is that you're doing quite well on things that matter most, but you might have an advantage on a space which maybe hasn't necessarily been disrupted yet. Here, an example would be attraction at a 73.9, kind of bang on in the middle of your driver profile. What we'd recommend brands do next is to look, if attraction's peaking, for your brand in particular, how has attraction changed over time? So in the same example, what's really convenient for the brand was that they saw that in 2019, that driver was relatively unimportant in the category. But in the last kind of 12 months, it's risen to be within the top kind of 6 to 8 drivers that are required for brands in the category. So you can easily show a buyer that not only are you delivering on what's most important, but your brand's in pole position to deliver on what's growing in importance. And equally, when you layer on the competition within the platform, what you see is at a glance where your advantage lies. So by adding the competition to your 16 driver profile, what this creates for you is a really simple index of your brand versus the competition. You can see your brand in white, and you've got competitors A and B indexed off of it. So here you can see immediately at a glance kind of where people feel your brand outperforms the competition and where it is that your brand might have legroom to make up. So in this example, a brand can be really confident when they're presenting to a buyer that they're amongst competitors A and B, really the only ones best to deliver performance all the way through attraction within the category. Attraction being that key driver that we saw people feeling they needed more and more versus 1 year ago. So Lisa, when it comes to disruption in the category, we had a number of questions come in on the subject, and one in particular caught our eye, which was, what's the single most kind of compelling criteria a small brand can show you to convince you as a buyer to lean in and listen?
Yeah, good question. It's probably quite a short answer from me. It's all about innovation and bringing something new to market. If you've got a product that makes people's lives easier or makes people happier, then it's always going to be a winner for me.
Innovation it is.
It is.
We also had a second question in this space, which was around the most powerful insight you've seen. I'm sure that you've seen lots of different sell index from lots of different types of brands, but is there something that really stuck home with you, an insight maybe that you saw that you feel brands should integrate into their retailer stories?
Yeah, I think this is quite a hard question. It really, really depends on your product type and what insight is going to be the most impactful. So at a sort of top line, things like market share impact or any significant category changes would always be really interesting to me, kind of areas of growth. An example, I don't know if anyone remembers, there was a gold iron. It had no share 1 month and 12% market share the next. Things like that is really engaging. For me also, any innovative claims that can be substantiated, really, really useful as well. And then for me, sometimes it depends again on the product, but I think some level of product endorsement. So whether it's consumers or someone who's used it and had a good result from it, kind of whether that's abroad where it launched first, whether it's brand ambassadors, I guess it's anything that adds credibility to the product is also really helpful.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I can see a train going by actually out your window. It's fantastic.
Sorry.
You can't control it. It's perfect. Thank you for that. Okay, onward guys. So step 3, maximizing a buyer's category values. This is kind of the meat and bones of your trade story here, which we're going to dig into next. So keeping in mind that, the buyer's goal essentially is to grow the value of their category, just like kind of your goal as a brand owner is to grow the value of your brand. So your trade story really should show kind of how buying your brand will grow their category. And there's 3 kind of roads in that I've used to kind of show a buyer that by stocking your product on shelf, you can drive their category value. So let's go through each of them. The first is, how does your brand could your brand, for example, bring more users in? Could your brand bring more usage to the category, or could your brand trade people up within it? What's really important to keep in mind is that your trade story does not have to do all 3 of these things. It probably won't, but picking 1 or 2 is plenty to focus on. But I'd like to acknowledge that there are 3 different ways in, depending on the brands that have joined us today, for you to pick 1 or 2 that make the most sense for your particular scenario. So starting with more users, the first is really about, how could your brand bring more shoppers into this category this year than were present last year? More usage is about kind of the frequency of purchase. Is by having your brand on shelf, the likelihood that people are going to buy more units this year than they did last year. And trading people up within the category is really about the price of your product and what your product is offering and the value that it serves. So is what you're bringing to the table going to drive and command a premium? and get people to essentially pay more every time they walk into a store. So we'll explore each of these in turn. When it comes to more users, so it's really about understanding kind of the penetration of the category. Obviously, every category is different. Is the category expandable? There might be, for example, a subsegment of people, whether that's men or women, young or old, or even kind of a lifestyle segment that isn't currently buying into the category that your brand is speaking to, that your brand's target audience is speaking to, that currently aren't shoppers within this category. And if you can show a buyer that by shelving your products, you're going to expand that category by bringing more people into their aisles, that's a really great starting point for showing how your brand will add category value. Now, within our platform, you can actually look at non-users. So this is one example that I found of non-users, the total kind of feelings that non-users felt a brand versus two competitors had in our platform as of January 2020 versus currently in August today. And what we saw is that the brand, which is, you can see it in blue on the right side of your screen at a 31.9, in January has seen, since the start of the year, a pretty strong rise up to a 57.5 in terms of how well people who don't buy the brand feel about the brand, which is a really great thing to show a buyer that your brand is best positioned to bring non-users into the category. And you can see that not just at a single point in time, but you can also look at that over a time series view. So here we've got kind of a non-user score plotted day in, day out from the start of May through essentially the start of August. And here you can see that the brand in question has gone from third all the way into a leading position. So they've got this momentum behind their brand where non-users of their products are feeling really passionately, more positively towards the brand. And so positioning your brand as a recruitment driver within the category is one way that you can show a buyer that your brand is best positioned amongst all the others to deliver category value. The second way that a brand could drive category value is by focusing on more usage. So things like, how will your brand drive, frequency? How will it make people, for example, purchase more products this year than maybe people did last year? Lisa talked about sustainability, so a really important caveat on that is that if you're going after a frequency play, it needs to be done in a sustainable way. Considering usage occasions is another important thing. So are there opportunities where people are using the category that there might be additional opportunities for them to use it a second or third time, either per day, per week, or per year? And then finally, are there opportunities to optimize kind of the price and the product architecture that your brand's delivering? You could be bringing a product, for example, to market that leans into different price elasticities of shoppers essentially within the category. And it could be, for example, a lower priced product that's smaller for on the go, or a slightly higher priced product for families to use in a sharing setting. So making sure that your brand is positioned to deliver to the different price elasticities of shoppers within the category allows them to have more reason and more occasion-based opportunities to use your brand. So within ProQuo, for those on the platform, we have a custom questions feature. And if you joined us a bit late, we are offering a free custom question per brand for a month. And you can grab that at proquoai.com/upgrades if you're on the platform now. But this is one great way of showing a buyer how your brand could drive more usage occasions within the category. It's a health and beauty brand in question here. What we asked is, what other occasions are there within the category that you might be open to using this category? And clicking in, the brand that we were looking at had an offer that was available only with morning usage. But what they started to see was that there was an opportunity for people with their behaviors changing, probably driven through working from home, that they were kind of leaning more into a nighttime routine. So this brand could deliver, for example, a new product that delivers both day and night to deliver increased, usage within the category. We've seen food brands do this quite a bit as well, exploring kind of on the go or exploring different cooking occasions, how, for example, a peanut butter might be used when cooking dinner as an ingredient versus just as a spread in the morning to drive more usage occasions. So there's plenty of opportunities there. The third and final way of driving category value is through exploring more trade up. And in this example, it's really about thinking, how can your brand be more profitable to the buyer versus other brands that they might be looking at within their category? When people purchase your brand versus the competition, is the basket size of that purchase bigger than it would be without your brand there? Are you launching a new product development that has a really awesome set of benefits that command a premium price that people are willing to pay for, and so people are willing to pay more for your brand within it? Not all brands are going to be able to compete on the trade up side, depending on how they're positioned, but when you can, it's a really powerful lever to explore. And within ProQuo, you can see kind of the power of your brand's value for money trended over time, as you see here in this example. Really, from the start of the year, the brand's value for money versus their competition has started to go up, really from the 15th of April until just after the 5th of July, where they've overtaken their competition. And so if you're a brand that's commanding a price premium and you're able to show that people feel that your brand is more worth it than the competition, I mean, that's really gold for creating any trade story out there. Lisa, so when it comes to metrics, I mean, we've talked about more users, more usage, and trade up, but what are the metrics you look at on a product to decide if you're going to keep the product on the shelf or, as they said, ditch the product?
There's lots of different metrics that we'd look at, and also making sure you've given the product an adequate amount of time to set a base level. And as I said, depending on the value of your product, the average selling price can take time on that when it's a more considered purchase. So obviously the commercials, so the rate of sale of the product is key, and then depending on where your product's on which market, that will play more or less of an effect. The product profitability is really, really important for me. Other things that I would look for, so any feedback, so whether that's customer feedback, whether that's employee feedback, whether it's your ratings and reviews, how's the product going down with the customer base is really important for me as well. And then I guess it's also around, differentiation. What does this product offer for me? Does it offer something unique? Do I have a first to market on it? All things like that would always be a really big consideration on keeping products on shelf and driving differentiation.
Fantastic. Thank you. We've got one more question on this step, which was asked by a number of people, and it was around how a challenger brand can best justify space on shelf. There's a lot of other established global brands out there, but the question was asked, how could you do that in maybe a category that feels a bit stale?
So I guess it's sort of always starting off fairly realistic with expectations, and understanding that as you develop that relationship, your product can build and grow. It's those key USPs, so unique selling points of your product, that allow it some point of differentiation. That can be anything from innovation to price, what it represents as value to the customer. Things like, what's the standout on shelf? What does it look like? Will it attract people's attention? And how that brand can also work with you to deliver that to the customer. So again, whether in the online world, we're talking about amazing assets, video content, all things that will really support and justify its space on shelf. There's loads of innovative things that people you can do to support your brand, and people come with marketing plans and kind of how they're driving awareness. Again, really can help sell that story and why it's going to give the retailer a really great return on investment and separate them from their competitors.
That's fantastic. That's actually a perfect segue actually to step four, because it's here where we're going to talk about showing the success of your marketing and the importance that that holds within your trade story. So, within your presentation, you're really going to want to show a buyer that, you're serious about investing in your brand, and they should be too. Essentially, it's a two-way street. It's a relationship after all. And what's great to show kind of in your trade story is that as you advertise your brand grows. So show your advertising plans to the buyer. Show kind of how in the past, when you've advertised your brand, it's kind of gripped in the minds of people, and build the confidence within the buyer that as you advertise the current offering that you're presenting, it's going to do the same. So essentially, it's about kind of when you market your brand, it's gripped by people. And there's two sides of the equation that I'll briefly touch on. The first is that it's memorable, and the second is that your brand is something that people are aware of. We're actually writing a paper next month specifically on brand memorability and how it's the precursor to brand awareness. And brand memorability is so key, especially for challenger brands, because it allows you to essentially earn awareness. I've seen so many times that brands that are unmemorable, they just pump money into awareness driving media, and during the campaign periods they see their awareness grow, but as soon as that media is turned off, they tend to see kind of their awareness start to fade. What happens if you're a brand that's built with memorability at the core is that, yes, you reap the rewards of awareness growing during campaign periods, but your awareness tends to hold a heck of a lot stronger when your brand is a memorable one to start. And to build brand memorability, it's all about, looking at the experience that your brand is offering people. So it's about looking at the end-to-end customer journey, everything from customer first hearing about your brand to first buying it, to the pre-usage experience, to the usage experience, and so on. And figuring out as a brand owner, where could you innovate within the customer journey? What are 1 to 2 surprisingly memorable moments that you could major on? An example is Apple. So everyone who's an Apple buyer remembers, the unboxing experience. It's a pre-usage experience. It's pleasurable. It's surprisingly memorable. And Apple have chosen to major on that moment. What you couldn't really recall is the experience you've had buying an HP or a Dell in that same regard. And that's because they haven't focused on driving kind of a memorable, surprisingly memorable customer experience on that occasion. But investing in brand memorability and building your brand to be memorable at the core will allow you to drive more efficient brand awareness. Brand awareness can be measured in 2 different ways. We look at both prompted awareness, which is looking at a list of brands. We ask people how many that they've heard of, as well as unprompted awareness, which asks people to list all of the brands they remember. So the saliency, the top of mind awareness of a brand within a category. On our platform, we look at both prompted and unprompted awareness. And in this view here, kind of what's great to show in your trade story is your brand's unprompted awareness trended over time. In this example, we've got the brand on ProQuo as the brand in blue, and you can see that their brand's unprompted awareness has grown pretty steadily since the start of April. On the x-axis, the little blue circles that you see on the x-axis are events. They're marketing activations. And while we won't go into this today, what you can do within the platform is you can plot your marketing activities, and you can show a buyer how your unprompted awareness grows as you invest in your brand. We know that unprompted awareness is really closely linked to household penetration. So when you do see your unprompted awareness grow as a challenger brand, it's a really good signal to position your brand with a buyer as needing to be in more stores, because arguably you should be being found in more homes. So Lisa, an anecdote, if you don't mind, on the best success story. So the story maybe of being an underdog, one that you remember.
Sure. Okay, so best success story and underdog. So it's a little while ago. It's probably back in 2015, 2016, and the product was NutriBullet. So I think NutriBullet's a really great example because it completely reinvented what is quite a traditional category of food blending. And not only that, it created a new category of personal blending that now actually really resonates with customers. It's quite a consumer-friendly term. So kind of back then, it was sort of health and well-being were on the rise. People were really time poor. So it kind of really had a great platform for building that momentum. In the blending market, it's kind of lots of big brands in that space. And the innovation typically has probably been driven by like power of blender. So it was a fairly kind of quietish market. We'd had the juicing trend a couple of years before in the UK, but that kind of had been and gone a little bit. So why I think this product's quite exciting was it was a pretty much an unheard of brand in the UK, but it actually wasn't a new product, and it had existed in the US market and other markets. But it was innovative in its personal blending aspect that hadn't been thought of before, which really captured consumers, but also in its channel to market. So for you who remember, it came to market via television shopping. So not always the most traditional route, so really new and innovative. And I think the product was great because it captured the hearts and minds of that consumer. It really understood it. It brought new money. I mean, it delivered multi-million pounds to the category over the year. It's created a permanent personal blending category. So quite a sort of underdog product and quite exciting for me personally.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that with us. And we have one other question related to kind of the power of marketing when it comes to entering a new retailer, for example. So if we were to ask you, Lisa, so what's the most effective way of spending marketing budget when entering a major retail?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's quite dependent on the product, I would say, and the brand. And I would always say these things can often be pretty bespoke. So I guess these are more kind of high level top line ideas. So the things I would always think about are make sure you're targeting high footfall times or you're targeting category moments for that product. So make sure it's when the customer's already looking for it. Key things for me, as I keep saying, sorry, broken record, but ratings and reviews really, really important. So if you can be part of any syndication, any review panels, that's always a great way. We've also said how important, especially what we've seen with online growth, making sure you've got great online assets, investing in those sort of campaigns, email awareness is always great. Other things to think about in store, and depending on your product, promotional ends can be really, really successful. Promotional call outs on the websites, fly outs, it's depending on what you're marketing, what USP. And then I'd always say kind of being part of wider retailer campaigns, that's great. That can really add quite a lot of gravitas and reach to the product you're marketing. But I'd probably just think about your product, think about whether it's an impulse, whether it's a considered, because that would really affect some of your marketing budgets. If it's an impulse buy, those promo ends are going to be absolutely fantastic. Whereas if it's more highly considered, that's where customers are doing research and things like ratings and reviews come in really play an important role. Great assets. Can the customer visualize the product in their house, for example? So really, as I said, it is hopefully giving you a few ideas there, but it really is quite product dependent.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. We've got one more step to go, and we've got just about 10 minutes left in today's webinar, which is great. And the last step is really, I guess, one for Lisa again, which is about building a relationship with your buyer. Relationships are everything, and showing that you're in it together. You and the buyer is a really important thing. So Lisa, we've got two questions in this space for you. And the first is about building relationships. What's the best way that a brand could build a relationship with the buyer?
Sure. So again, from my personal point of view, the way you can build it with me is really knowledgeable about your product, but also a real passion for your product, and making sure that comes across. I'm quite passionate about products, so that's something that really resonates with me. I think it's great to get that working relationship together, so being open to feedback, any tweaks and things that can be made, but also how you can generate ideas together to build those marketing plans, displays in stores, whatever it is. So really making sure that we're both really excited about that launch. On a really boring note, just being really reliable with stock. That's a great way to build, just making sure we can trust the supply chain, the stock's coming in, that's brilliant. That's sort of essential for me. Also being a really good communicator, clear communication in whatever format. I find that really, really helpful. Being proactive in that as well is great, but most importantly, being yourself and being excited about your product.
That's fantastic. And there's a lot of brands that have joined our call that maybe are trying to break into a new retail store, a new kind of multiple. So could you help us understand kind of the flip side of the equation is how best could you approach a buyer maybe that you don't have a relationship with yet, that you hope to form a relationship with?
Yeah, sure. So this is always tough on how to do that initial engagement piece. And one of the things I really enjoy going to and will go to again is trade shows. I do think they're really great, the way that you can display your products and what it stands for and get buyers who are walking past to engage, and you can really see if that's the right fit. So that's great. I guess in a digital world, it's kind of how do you translate that impact that you deliver at a trade show into an email format? So things like kind of short and sweet communication, really capturing the attention quickly. Like everyone now, people are receiving hundreds of emails a day. So how does it stand out? Sometimes I think like this is really simple, but the image of the product and the body of the email can be really helpful to do that. Other bits I would say, make it feel personal and specific to that person and that retailer, and why it would align well. Kind of using the buyer's name, that's always really helpful. And as I said, yeah, just how you can get across yourself and that passion for the product. They're probably my kind of bits that I would say of when you're approaching a buyer, or what I personally would look for.
That's really helpful. I think passion and presentation is such an important thing. And a lot of brands that have joined us here today have had such a hand in building their brand's reputation and what their brand stands for, that usually comes second nature to them, which is fantastic. So thanks for sharing all of that with us. Just to finish off here, we've got a few final tips, which may seem, a bit obvious, but we do want to reiterate here for you guys here, which is that it's really important to kind of let your data do the talking. So building a persuasive story really starts with the data that you have at your fingertips, that you use to kind of surround your story behind. And you want to deliver that story in a really open and honest and authentic way. If you lead with the facts, otherwise it's going to be quite hard, to deliver a trade story and to back yourself up. But if you've got data at your fingertips and a really confident, approachable presentation style, you're going to see that a buyer is going to kind of gravitate more towards you as you present your brand. Additionally, making your story retail specific is really important. Going through the effort of understanding what drives that particular retailer, what is that buyer's goal for their stores within that year is really important. And understanding that the people who shop within the buyer stores are not all created equal. So a Walmart shopper is different than a Target shopper, and an Asda shopper is different than a Waitrose shopper. And so building and making a conscious effort to design a presentation that's specifically targeted to that retail buyer is really key. Specifically showing how your brand can deliver category value for them just by stocking it on shelf. I'm going to skip ahead to what's next because we're nearly out of time here, and focus on what's to come. So we are going to be cascading tomorrow a question and answer. So including all of the questions that Lisa went through today, alongside some additional questions that you asked, ProQuo has answered. And that's going to be delivered to you in your inboxes tomorrow afternoon, along with an on-demand link to this webinar. So you can reference it and watch it in your own time and share it around as you'd like. And as I mentioned at the start, if you joined us late, if you're currently a customer on ProQuo, we, as a thank you for joining today, we'd love to provide you with 1 month of a custom question for each brand joining, and that's available at ProQuoAI.com/upgrades, using the first 3 letters of your first name and last name. Someone from our team, as soon as you submit your details, will be in touch to make sure that you get that custom question for free. And if you've joined us today for the first time, but you're interested in getting started, it takes only about a week to get all of the data that you saw today within our platform, especially created for you in your competitive set. If you'd like to get started, just visit ProQuoAI.com/get started. And we'd love to give you, as a thank you for joining today, free brand awareness tracking using the same promo code, first 3 letters of your first name and last name. And with all of that said, I guess I'd first like to say a massive thank you to Lisa for taking the time to be with us here today. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me. Nice to meet you all.
And a massive thank you to all of you who have chosen to tune in at the end or the middle or the start of your days, wherever you are in the world. We'll be doing these regularly at ProQuo, so we hope to see you again soon, to hear from you again soon. And until next time, enjoy the rest of your day. Have a great week ahead, and thank you for tuning in. See you later. Bye, everyone.